Hey family, before I tell you my story, promise me something. If you've ever been made to feel small, like your dreams were silly or your worth could be measured in someone else's approval, then you'll stay with me till the end. Because I swear, you'll see what happens when silence turns into strength. So drop a heart in the comments if you've ever had to rebuild yourself. And don't forget to subscribe. We heal and rise together here. Ready? Let's start. He once told me I'd never make it without him. I remember those words like they were branded into my skin. That night, he stood outside a hall filled with people who used to be our friends. Inside, I was being honored, my name echoing through a microphone that once only spoke his. Through the glass, I could see him watching me, the same man who used to decide which version of me was allowed to exist. Funny, isn't it? The man who said I couldn't survive without his name couldn't even get inside the room where mine was being celebrated. People always ask me, when did things change? Truth is, it didn't happen overnight. It started years earlier, in the tiny moments where I laughed off disrespect and called it love. That night, holding my award, I smiled for the cameras. But deep down, I was remembering the woman I used to be, the one who believed him when he said I was nothing without him. That version of me deserved to see this night too. The beginning. Back then, I was still Maya, the dreamer, the designer. He was Ethan, the man who said he built empires. We used to live in a small apartment, half plans and half promises. I'd spend nights sketching homes filled with light. He'd spend them talking about profit margins and land prices. Paper houses won't feed us, he said once, brushing past my desk. I laughed softly and told him, maybe not, but they'll make people happy. He just smiled like I was a child. He called my dreams cute. I called his arrogance ambition. That's how we fooled ourselves for so long, giving gentle names to things that were slowly killing us. When my boss entered my office one morning and said, Maya, your design is going into the City Modern Challenge, I froze. My heart raced, not from excitement, but fear. Would he even care? That night, I cooked his favorite dinner, thinking he'd walk in smiling. I didn't know I was setting the table for my own awakening. You'll always need me. I waited 3 hours for him that night. The candles melted down before he even stepped inside. When he finally did, I ran to him, my hands still trembling with joy. I won, Ethan! They picked my design! He looked at the little trophy on the table, then back at me like I'd just told a joke. That's nice, but let's be real. You'd still be living in your parents' basement if it weren't for me. He poured himself a drink and added, You'll always need me, Maya. You'd crumble without me. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just stood there and felt something inside me break. But it wasn't my heart. It was my illusion. The man I'd built my world around had just told me the foundation was never mine. I cleaned the dishes after he went upstairs. The food was cold, but the realization was hot enough to burn. He didn't see me as his partner. He saw me as proof of his generosity. Lucky he married her. A few weeks later, I brought him lunch at work, a small peace offering for all our silence. When I walked in, he was laughing on speakerphone. She's sweet, he said to someone, but honestly, she's lucky I married her. The room went quiet when he saw me standing there. I left the food on his desk and walked out before he could speak. That sentence kept echoing as I drove home. Lucky I married her. No, Ethan, you were lucky. You were lucky I believed in you, that I carried your weight when you couldn't carry yourself. That night, I sat by the window and whispered to no one, I'm done. Not done loving, done shrinking. Sometimes the deepest heartbreak doesn't sound like screaming. It sounds like silence thick enough to choke on. Okay, let's see. The next morning, I woke up early, made 1 cup of coffee just for me. He walked in, looked at the counter, and frowned. No breakfast? He asked. I smiled. I thought you said I'd crumble without you. I'm just testing that theory. He didn't answer. He just stared confused as I turned back to my sketches. For the first time, the pencil didn't shake in my hand. People think change starts with big speeches or dramatic exits, but mine started with 3 quiet words I said to myself while tracing a new design line. Okay, let's see. Let's see what happens when I stop being afraid of my own strength. Let's see what happens when silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Let's see what happens when I finally build something that's mine. So, if you've ever been where I was, standing in a house built on someone else's pride, remember this. You don't have to burn it down. Just walk out and build your own.
Routine flip. You don't really notice how much of your life revolves around someone else until you stop orbiting them. The first morning I didn't move for him felt strange. I woke up to the sound of his alarm blaring at 6:30, sharp, repetitive, commanding, the same way he used to be. Usually, I'd already be downstairs by then, making his egg white omelet, toasting his bread, setting his travel mug by the door. This time, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, and let the alarm ring until he got up to turn it off. He walked into the kitchen, expecting the same routine, the smell of breakfast, coffee brewing, the quiet hum of his kingdom being cared for. But the counter was empty. The coffee pot was cold, and I was sitting on the balcony, sipping my own cup, sketchbook open, legs tucked under me like I used to before him. "Morning," I said without looking up. He hesitated. "No breakfast?" I smiled gently. "No, I thought you'd like to handle that. Since you decide when we talk or spend time together." He didn't answer. Just that same confused, silent stare, the one you give a stranger who looks familiar but isn't playing their usual part. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was satisfying. Because silence used to be his weapon. Now it was mine. That day, I stopped sending him reminders. No texts about his meetings, no dry cleaning pickups, no calendar updates. At first, he didn't notice. Then he started forgetting things. Missed a call, burnt toast, lost his favorite tie. Each small crack in his perfect system was like a whisper in my head. See, he's the one who crumbled. When I came home from work that evening, the house looked different. Not physically, emotionally. The air that used to hum with tension now felt still. He was sitting at the table with takeout containers, scrolling through his phone like he was trying to fill a void he didn't understand. "How was your day?" he asked suddenly. He never asked before. "Quiet," I said, smiling. "Just the way you like it." He nodded, pretending not to notice that I didn't join him for dinner. You know what's wild? Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like not checking your phone every 5 minutes for someone who never texted anyway. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something simple but powerful. I'd been managing 2 lives all along. Mine and his. And the more I let go of his, the more space I had to finally live mine. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and started running again, something I hadn't done since we got married. The air was cold, my lungs burned, but it felt like breathing for the first time. He used to say I couldn't function without him, but the truth, he was the one who couldn't function without the version of me that existed just to make his world easier. And I was done being hurt. Reconnection. He used to say I couldn't function without him, but the truth, he was the one who couldn't function without the version of me that existed just to make his world easier. And I was done being her. That weekend, I sat alone in a small cafe I hadn't visited in years, the one near my old university. I used to come here when life felt heavy, when dreams felt too big for my reality. Now I was back, not because I was lost, but because I was finding myself again. As I sipped my coffee, a familiar voice called my name. "Maya?" I looked up. It was Isha, my old design mentor. Her gray streaks had deepened, but her energy was the same. Sharp, kind, impossible to ignore. "Maya Khanna," she smiled, pulling me into a hug. "You disappeared. Where have you been hiding your brilliance?" I laughed softly. "In someone else's shadow, I guess." She studied my face for a moment. Not pity, just understanding. "I'm glad you stepped out. I might have something for you." It wasn't a grand offer, no movie moment opportunity, no life-changing job, but a small freelance project redesigning a community space for a local shelter. But to me, it felt like oxygen. "I'll do it," I said before she even finished explaining. That night, I worked on the concept till past midnight. The house was quiet, Ethan was asleep, oblivious to the soft scratch of my pencil sketching a new start. It wasn't about money or validation, it was about remembering what it felt like to create something that was mine. When I finished, I looked at my design. Clean, hopeful lines, open light. It felt like my own heart drawn in architecture. You know that feeling when something inside you finally clicks back into place? That's what this project did. For months, I'd been existing. Now, I was becoming. A week later, Aisha called. "They loved your concept, Maya. They want to move forward. You'll get your first payment next week." Her voice was cheerful, casual even, but I froze, staring at the phone. My first personal paycheck in months? Not from Ethan's company, not through his account, from me. When it arrived, I didn't cash it immediately. I held it in my hands, just staring at my name written in ink. That little rectangle of paper felt heavier than gold, because it wasn't just money. It was proof that I still existed outside his control. That evening, Ethan walked in as I was closing my laptop. "What's that?" he asked. "Work," I replied simply. He frowned. "I didn't know you were taking projects again. I didn't think I needed your permission." He blinked, thrown off balance, then muttered something under his breath and walked away. That's when it hit me. The shift had already begun. He didn't realize it yet, but every sketch, every line, every quiet no I spoke was a brick in the foundation of my freedom. And soon, I wasn't just going to be surviving in that house. I was going to outgrow it completely. Subtle hooks of growth. That's when it hit me. The shift had already begun. He didn't realize it yet, but every sketch, every line, every quiet no I spoke was a brick in the foundation of my freedom. And soon, I wasn't just going to be surviving in that house. I was going to outgrow it completely. The changes started small, almost invisible. I stopped curling my hair the way he liked it. I wore it loose, wild, like when I was 20 and unafraid of being seen. I started running again, not to lose weight, but to lose the heaviness that had settled inside of me. And every morning, I'd run through the park with my music loud enough to drown out the voice that used to tell me I wasn't enough. And when the sun rose, I'd whisper, "This is my time." Simple, but sacred. I started listening to podcasts, stories of women who rebuilt their lives piece by piece, and somewhere between their words, I started recognizing pieces of myself. I started journaling again, too. At first, just one line a day, "I'm still here." Then paragraphs poured out, pain, anger, relief, hope. My handwriting grew steadier with every page. Ethan didn't notice any of it. The early runs, the headphones, the quiet smile that came from a secret only I knew. He thought I was just keeping busy. But what I was really doing was coming back to life. I replaced the framed wedding photo in my workspace with a photo of my first sketch, the one I made in college. That, to me, was love now. Not dependency, not fear, just creation. And slowly, I started enjoying my own company again. I'd light a candle at night, make tea, and sit with myself. No noise, no pretending. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. He noticed eventually. Not at first. Men like Ethan never see you change until the change no longer benefits them. One night, he came home later than usual, his tie loose and his tone sharp. "You've been quiet lately." I replied, "Just focused." "Focused on what? You barely talk to me anymore." I looked at him calmly. "You asked for space. I'm giving you to." That sentence, small, polite, but it landed like thunder. He blinked, caught off guard, unsure how to argue without looking like the villain. He called me cold the next week, then ungrateful. And finally, one morning as I was heading out for a run, he muttered, "You've changed." I smiled. "I hope so." He didn't understand. He thought distance was punishment. For me, it was peace. He started doing little things to regain control, commenting on my clothes, questioning my schedule, pretending concern, but I stopped explaining myself. I'd nod, smile, and walk away. You know what's wild? True power doesn't mean winning. When you try to pull someone into a fight and you simply refuse to step into their chaos. One evening as he scrolled on his phone, he said, "You don't even care if I come home anymore." I looked at him and said softly, "I stopped caring about things that don't care about me." That shut him up completely. He didn't know what to do with this version of me, the one who didn't beg, didn't argue, didn't break, because his control had always depended on my reactions. Now, I gave him none. And that silence, it scared him more than any fight ever could. The private promise. One night after he fell asleep, I sat by my desk and opened my journal again. I had grown too much to keep pretending I was the same woman he married. I opened the voice recorder on my phone, took a deep breath, and whispered, "This is the last time I ever let someone define my worth." I didn't cry when I said it. It wasn't a sad promise. It was a vow of freedom. Because once you realize your worth, you stop negotiating it. After that night, I started saving quietly. A little from every freelance project, I'd transfer the money into a private account, the someday fund, I called it. Someday, when I could walk away with dignity, Someday, when I wouldn't have to ask permission to breathe. Every time I got paid, I'd smile to myself, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. Choice. I didn't buy new clothes, didn't splurge on anything, but I did buy one thing, a small silver keychain shaped like a house, my quiet reminder that one day I'd design one for myself. He noticed me working late some nights. "You're obsessed with that laptop," he said once. I smiled. "You said I'd crumble without you. I'm just making sure I can stand on my own when that happens." He laughed, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't. Because that's the thing about rebuilding yourself. People only realize what you were doing when the house is already standing and they're still looking for the door. And as I watched him sleeping that night, the same man who once believed he owned my peace, I whispered to myself, "You have no idea what's coming." Because this time, the storm wasn't him. It was me.
He always said I couldn't survive without him. Funny thing is, the more I learned to stand alone, the smaller he started to look. I remember the night I decided to leave. It wasn't dramatic. No fight, no shouting. Just a quiet moment when I looked around that house and realized every single thing inside it had his name on it. The mortgage, the furniture, even the Wi-Fi password. Everything except me. So I made a decision. Not someday, not eventually. Now. I walked into a small real estate office the next morning with trembling hands and a calm heart. The agent smiled and handed me a list of rentals. I pointed to a one-bedroom loft with big windows and light pouring through. "That one," I said. "Do you want to think about it?" she asked. "No," I whispered. "I've done enough thinking." When she slid the papers across the desk, I hesitated only for a second before signing my name. Maya Khanna. My name, not Mrs. Anything. That signature felt like my first heartbeat after a long coma. I didn't tell Ethan, not yet. While he traveled for work, I packed little by little. A book here, a sketch pad there, my grandmother's bracelet I'd hidden in the drawer. Every item felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he'd once taken for granted. I opened a storage box and placed my old journals inside. When I sealed the lid, I wrote one word on the tape. Freedom. A week later, I stood in front of my new place, an empty, sunlit space with bare walls and dusty floors. I carried in one small box, set it down in the middle of the room, and just stood there. The light touched my face, and for the first time in years, I felt completely mine. No voices telling me what I could or couldn't do, no footsteps following behind me demanding perfection, just me. I whispered into the quiet, "Mine." That word echoed through the room like a promise. Mine, the space. Mine, the peace. Mine, the future. I didn't know what came next. Bills, loneliness, fear, maybe all of it. But I did know this. I'd rather struggle in a home that's mine than live comfortably in a house that cages me. So that night I lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, surrounded by nothing but the hum of possibility. And before sleep took me, I smiled and said to the darkness, "Tomorrow we start over." Because for the first time, I wasn't running from him. I was running toward myself. Career bloom. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows like it had something important to tell me. I brewed coffee, opened my sketch pad, and realized, for the first time in years, there was no one looking over my shoulder, no one telling me how to measure success. Just blank pages, open air, and my own hands ready to create. I decided that if I was going to start over, I'd do it properly. Not small, not timid. I wanted a studio that reflected me, the real me, something that wasn't just functional, but alive. I named it Haven Concepts. The name made me smile. A haven for creativity, a haven for possibility, and most importantly, a haven for myself. The first project came through my mentor, Aisha, a small eco-friendly housing redesign for a local shelter. Nothing glamorous yet, but it was mine. Every line I drew, every choice I made was a rebellion against the years I'd spent drawing inside the lines someone else had dictated. Then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I opened my email to see a journalist had stumbled upon the shelter project. She wanted to feature my design, my philosophy, my story. My hands shook as I read the email, an opportunity I hadn't even been looking for. The article went live the next week. And just like that, the world noticed. People shared it, friends reached out, fellow designers messaged me, curious, inspired. And Ethan? I caught a glimpse of him on social media, his name trending for a deal gone wrong, while mine was trending for vision. I laughed quietly to myself. He always said I'd never make it without him. Funny, I was making it, and he wasn't even in the room. I rented a small studio space downtown. White walls, big windows, the smell of fresh paint and potential. I painted the logo on the door myself, a simple house outline with a rising sun behind it. Every brushstroke felt like I was reclaiming pieces of my past I'd been told were worthless. Clients came slowly at first, but they came. And every time someone told me, "We've never seen designs like this before," I felt my confidence expand like sunlight through my windows. I began experimenting with sustainable materials, blending aesthetics with responsibility. I stayed late, scribbling notes, measuring, testing prototypes. I didn't feel exhausted. I felt alive. For the first time, my work was mine, and not a reflection of someone else's ambition. Then came the email that made me stop everything. A major online design magazine wanted to feature my eco-housing project. A full story with photos, interviews, the works. I stared at the screen, then looked out the window at the city below. This was it. The moment where my quiet rebuilding became visible to the world. I sat back, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, he wanted this life for himself. Now I'm living it. And with that, I realized something profound. Success isn't revenge. It's freedom. It's the quiet satisfaction of building something that belongs entirely to you, from scratch, with your own hands, your own heart, your own vision. Ethan's decline. Success didn't make me arrogant. It made me calm, focused, and, I admit, quietly amused, because the higher I climbed, the harder Ethan stumbled. At first, it was subtle. A deal he was confident about would collapse unexpectedly. Clients would cancel calls, partners grew impatient. I saw it in the news and snippets of gossip that I didn't seek but couldn't ignore. I remember him laughing one evening, holding a glass of wine and saying, "You can't survive without me." Funny how the universe has a sense of irony. Then came the real chaos. He started calling, insisting on meetings, pushing for deals that had already fallen apart. His voice was sharper, less confident. The arrogance that once filled rooms like sunlight now felt like smoke, irritating, choking, and empty. I didn't gloat. I barely noticed. I was busy creating, designing, building something tangible. And while his empire teetered, mine blossomed quietly. Every sketch a reminder that power could be soft, persistent, and invisible until it arrived fully formed. At his company, employees whispered about him. Partners hesitated to sign contracts. He missed deadlines, blamed the market, blamed his team, but never himself. It was painful, and yet strangely poetic. One afternoon, I received a forwarded email. Ethan Khanna's latest project canceled. Client pulled out citing lack of clarity in execution. I smiled. No celebration, just recognition. His loss was my reflection, a mirror showing what happens when control becomes fragile without respect. And I realized, while he lost his foothold, I had finally built mine. The gala invitation. Then the call came. A prestigious city gala highlighting rising talent in sustainable architecture. They wanted me to present my eco-housing project. My heart skipped, not with nerves, but with recognition. The world was finally seeing what I had quietly built. I called Aisha immediately. "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered. "Ready?" she laughed. "You've been ready your whole life. You just didn't know it." He couldn't see it, Maya. The world will. Preparation became a ritual. Sketches, presentations, lighting, flow, everything had to speak without me saying a word. It wasn't just a project, it was my story, built with integrity, resilience, and heart. The night arrived. Crystal chandeliers, soft music, the hum of powerful people. I wore a simple dress, no extravagance. My confidence wasn't in what I wore, but in what I had built. I glanced through the crowd, and there he was. Ethan. Eyes wide, smile tight. He realized finally that the life he once wanted for himself was now mine to shape and share. The realization scene. The following morning, I scrolled through LinkedIn. My project was trending. Articles, shares, comments, accolades I'd never imagined. And there it was, his name, in contrast, tied to his latest failed venture. I smiled, not gloating, just observing, quietly, as life balanced itself. Then I saw the video clip. Ethan, in his penthouse, slammed a glass against the marble counter, the sound echoing in the silent room. Rage, frustration, helplessness. And I whispered to myself, soft but firm. Funny. The life he dreamed of became mine. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't malice. It was the pure satisfaction of being fully, unapologetically me. Someone he could no longer control, diminish, or define. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and realized the truth. Freedom is sweeter than validation. Success is richer when earned quietly, when built on your own strength. And the best part? He was watching, powerless to stop it.
Ethan's desperation. The doorbell rang mid-morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. My studio was quiet, sunlight bouncing off the white walls, and the model home scattered across my desk. When I opened a door, there he was. Ethan. Same sharp suit, same confident smile. Only this time, it was forced. Hollow. "Congratulations, Maya," he said, voice too bright, too practiced. "I saw the magazine feature. Impressive work." I smiled politely, the kind of smile you give a stranger who claims familiarity. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." He stepped inside, glancing at the miniature eco-houses lined on the shelves. "I didn't realize you'd taken on such ambitious projects. Very professional." Professional. I like that word, because it implied competence without permission, independence without apology. And I let it hang in the air, letting him realize slowly that I was no longer the woman who needed his approval. He lingered, shifting from foot to foot. I just wanted to see for myself, to understand. His voice faltered, and I caught the slightest tremor of panic beneath the surface. I handed him a cup of tea. "Sit," I said softly. My tone was calm, neutral, unshakable, a stark contrast to the storm I imagined raging behind his eyes. He hesitated, then took the chair opposite me. He tried to smile again, but it didn't reach his eyes. And I realized the truth. He was desperate. Desperate to regain a foothold in a world that had already moved on without him. "You've changed," he said finally, voice low. You're different." I nodded, sipping my tea. "Yes, I am. It's been a long process. I've built something for myself, something that belongs to me." He swallowed, his fingers tightening around the cup. I thought we'd build it together. You'd need me." I leaned back, letting the weight of silence speak. I don't need anyone to build me. Not harshly, not cruelly, calmly. And that's something you'll have to get used to. He looked at me then, not with anger, not with love, not with desire, but with the raw, unfiltered panic of a man realizing he no longer holds the keys to the life he thought he controlled. And in that quiet, tense moment, I understood something essential. Confrontation doesn't always need shouting or tears. Sometimes it's just showing up as yourself, fully, unapologetically, while the other person struggles to recognize the version of you they thought they owned. I sipped my tea and thought to myself, this is just the beginning. Let's see how he handles the rest of the truth. He begs privately. Later that evening, after the gallery lights dimmed and the city hummed softly outside my studio, he stayed behind. I was tidying up sketches, straightening tiny models of eco-homes, pretending not to notice. But I did. Ethan shuffled his feet, lingering by the doorway. There was no confident stride this time, no booming voice, no sharp jokes, only hesitation, raw, unpolished, desperate.
Maya? He started, voice uneven. Can we talk? I looked up slowly, arching an eyebrow. We can, I said, calm and collected, like I was letting a stranger borrow a chair in my home. He walked in, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding mine. For the first time, I saw him not as the man who had dictated my worth, but as a man who had lost control entirely. And it was almost pitiful. I lost everything since you left, he admitted, almost in a whisper. The words sounded foreign, like someone else's confession, not the man who once laughed at my ambition. I set down my pencil and looked at him directly. Calm. Grounded. Unshakable. No, I said softly, letting each word land like a weight. You didn't lose everything. You just lost your mirror. You can't see yourself without someone to reflect it. He froze, and I watched the color drain from his face. I could see it all at once, the arrogance, the control, the smirks, collapsing in on themselves. You're amazing. You've built all this, and He trailed off, swallowed hard, and finally muttered, I had no idea. I tilted my head, studying him. This was the moment I had imagined countless times in my quiet nights, but imagining it and living it were two different things. There was no gloating in my eyes, no triumph in my smile, just clarity, just peace. You didn't see it before, I said, and that's fine, because it was never yours to see. It was mine to build. He looked at the models, the sketches, the plans scattered across my desk. I thought I knew you, he admitted, voice trembling. I thought I had control. I thought I could guide you. I laughed softly, a gentle, almost sad sound. You thought wrong, I said. And that's the difference between us. I've learned to guide myself. I've learned that my value isn't defined by your permission or approval. He slumped into a chair, head in his hands, and for the first time, he was small. No bravado, no charm, no mask, just a man staring at the consequences of the life he tried to control and realizing the person he tried to control no longer belonged to him. I walked over, placing a gentle hand on the table, not touching him, not offering comfort, just presence. You wanted me dependent on you, I said, softly. But I wasn't. I'm not. And I never will be again. His voice cracked. Maya, I don't know how to... I don't even... He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't know the words, and I didn't need him to. Silence carried more weight than any speech he could have offered. Then he looked up, eyes glossy, almost pleading. Can we try again for old times? I shook my head slowly, a sad smile touching my lips. No, Ethan, we can't. This isn't about trying again. This is about recognition. Recognition that you can't own me. You can't define me. You can't contain me. He blinked, swallowed hard, and the reality settled in. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was free. He was confronted not by a fight, but by a mirror. The mirror he had always needed. I turned back to my sketches, letting the quiet hum of the studio fill the space. Ethan sat there, silent, defeated, watching me continue my work, the woman he tried to control thriving in her own vision. And as I traced a new line on my page, I whispered to myself, this is how it feels to be untouchable, not with power, not with anger, but with truth. Emotional flashback. I leaned back in my chair, pencil still in hand, and the quiet hum of the studio became a soundtrack to memory. Scenes flashed, fragments of a life I once lived, stitched together by sacrifice and submission. Him standing over me at the drafting table, tapping his finger impatiently. You'll never make it without me, Maya. Don't get ahead of yourself. I remember nodding, swallowing the hurt, pretending it was guidance, not control. The dinners I cooked while my own sketches lay unfinished. The nights I erased my own ideas because his approval was louder than my dreams. The mornings I smiled through exhaustion, hiding ambition beneath polite conversation. And then the first time I realized I was shrinking, bending to survive rather than to thrive, the weight of pretending to be someone he wanted left me hollow. I caught myself laughing at his jokes I didn't find funny, just to keep peace, and felt a chill in my chest. There were moments of small rebellion. A design competition I entered in secret, a journal entry no one could read, a phone call to Aisha, my mentor, when he was out of the house. Every tiny act a whisper of independence. But the turning point was quieter than I expected. One night after another argument about my work, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I just sat on the floor with my sketchbook, tracing lines, whispering to myself, okay, let's see. That moment, that stillness, was the emotional detachment. I realized then that I no longer needed his validation. My worth wasn't tied to his words or his approval. The woman he thought he owned, who had built a life around his expectations, was gone. In her place stood someone patient, strong, and quietly defiant. And as the flashbacks continued, I saw the truth clearly. Every insult, every belittling remark, every late-night disappointment was not a chain. It was a blueprint. Each piece of control he wielded against me had secretly taught me resilience, strategy, and the subtle power of silence. By the end, I was no longer the scared, compliant wife. I was the architect of my own future, and the realization was liberating. The past had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. I traced one final line across my sketchpad and whispered to myself, I am mine. The words settled in my chest like sunlight after a storm. It wasn't revenge I sought. It was recognition of my own strength. And for the first time, I knew the quiet, unshakable joy of freedom. Public moment of power. Weeks later, I stepped onto a stage at a city event honoring women shaping the future of architecture and sustainable design. The hall was alive with chatter, the soft clinking of glasses, and the low murmur of anticipation. I felt a flutter of nerves, but it wasn't fear. It was purpose, a deliberate, satisfying tension that comes when you know you are exactly where you belong. I began to speak. For too long, women have been asked to fit into someone else's blueprint.
But our futures are ours to design. Our voices are ours to build. And our dreams, they are ours to live, fully and unapologetically. Applause rose, some standing, some whispering in awe. And in the back, I saw him, Ethan, his jaw tight, posture rigid, watching, realizing. The life he once tried to control now thrived without him. Every word I spoke, every concept I presented was a brick in the foundation of my triumph. It wasn't about him or proving anything to him. It was about showing the world and myself the strength of a woman who refused to be defined by anyone else. As I answered questions, shared design philosophies, and highlighted the potential of eco-conscious architecture, his gaze never wavered. Silent, powerless, witnessing the life he wanted for himself now belong fully to me. And I realized something extraordinary. Public power doesn't scream or demand attention. It moves quietly, steadily, with truth and confidence. He couldn't interrupt, challenge, or diminish it. He could only watch. The event ended with a standing ovation. I walked off stage, heart steady, spine straight, and felt a rare mixture of relief, pride, and satisfaction. This was not victory in vengeance, but victory in authenticity. Later, as I looked out over the city skyline from the venue balcony, I whispered softly, "This is what it means to rise without permission. This is what power feels like when it belongs to you alone." Turning point. As I exited the gala, a journalist caught up with me, microphone poised, camera lights flickering. "Is it true your husband said you'd never make it?" I smiled softly, letting the moment linger, calm, collected, clear. I said, "He was right. I didn't make it with him. I made it without him." Her pen froze. The words resonated in the room like a gentle explosion. Not revenge, not bitterness, just truth. The quiet triumph of someone who refused to be diminished, restrained, or defined by another. He lingered nearby, half hidden, watching. The man who once dictated the terms of my life now had no role, no control, only observation. And I felt the full weight of that freedom, rich and unshakable. Walking through the city streets afterward, lights reflecting off glass buildings, I reflected on the journey. Every late-night sketch, every suppressed frustration, every quiet act of independence had led to this clarity. I had not just survived, I had rebuilt, thrived, shown. The turning point wasn't a shout, a confrontation, or a dramatic declaration. It was a quiet, resolute recognition. The life I had always wanted, the future I had dreamed of, existed not because of him, not despite him, but entirely because of me. And as I whispered to myself, eyes on the skyline, I made it. On my own terms. Fully. Unapologetically.
Quiet morning. I woke up to sunlight spilling through the tall windows of my apartment. The kind of sunlight that doesn't just illuminate a room, it warms your chest, whispers promises of possibility, and paints everything golden. No alarms, no hurried footsteps, no distant voice questioning my choices or reminding me of my place. Just the gentle rustle of leaves against the glass, the quiet hum of a city that now felt like it belonged to me, not him. I stretched, my body finally free of the tension I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. The yoga mat rolled neatly in the corner, my sketchbooks stacked like little monuments of effort and resilience. Each page, each line, a reminder that I had built this, with my own hands, my own heart, my own vision. I walked over to the balcony with a mug of coffee, inhaling deeply. The air was crisp, filled with possibility. I didn't have to worry about anyone else's expectations, their judgments, or their control. This morning wasn't just a morning. It was a declaration. I had arrived in my own life. Around me, the apartment was alive with quiet symbols of my independence. Plants I'd chosen, nurtured, and named. Sketches pinned to the wall. My designs, my dreams, my future. A single silver keychain shaped like a house lay on the table, catching the light. The same one I had bought months ago when I promised myself I would create a home that belonged to me. Now, it wasn't a promise. It was reality. I moved to my workspace and ran my hands over the models I had been building for weeks. Haven Concepts wasn't just a studio. It was a manifestation of my freedom, my creativity, and the years I had quietly, patiently rebuilt myself. Every curve, every line, every draft spoke of the patience and determination it had taken to reach this point. I paused and looked out over the city skyline. No chaos, no noise, just calm. A profound, almost sacred calm that filled every corner of my being. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the warmth as I traced the sunlight with my fingers on the glass. For years, I had lived under a shadow, one that told me who I was, what I could do, what I was worth, and for years I obeyed. But today that shadow had faded completely. The sunlight wasn't just outside. It was inside me. I smiled, letting a deep, unshakable peace settle in. I was awake, alive, and fully present in a life I had designed myself, not built around anyone else's pride, control, or approval. A life that was mine, entirely, unapologetically, and freely. And as I traced my sketch pad, thinking of the day ahead, I whispered softly, "This is what freedom feels like. This is what living for myself looks like, and I will never let anyone take this away." The full circle hook. I left my apartment and stepped into the soft bustle of the morning city. The air smelled faintly of rain and coffee, a reminder that life goes on, whether we notice it or not. I walked with ease, each step light with purpose, carrying the calm I had cultivated over the past months. As I turned the corner, a magazine stand caught my eye. At first, I barely recognized it. The cover was glossy, perfect, inviting the gaze of every passerby. And then I saw it. My face, my name. Maya Khanna, the visionary behind Haven Concepts. I stopped dead in my tracks. A mixture of disbelief and pride welled up inside me.
I remembered standing in that tiny apartment years ago, sketchbook open, wondering if I could ever live a life that truly belonged to me. And now, here I was. My work, my ideas, my vision, recognized. Publicly. Boldly. Beautifully. People passed by, barely noticing, but I didn't need their acknowledgement. The cover wasn't validation. It was confirmation. Of the years I had worked in silence, of the patience, the late nights, the quiet determination that had shaped every line, every model, every decision. I reached out and brushed my fingertips over the glossy cover, smiling softly. It felt surreal, like holding a dream in your hands. A dream you had fought to protect from doubt, from fear, from the weight of someone else's control. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The life I had always imagined wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It wasn't about him or their opinions or the expectations I had once carried like chains. It was about showing up for myself, consistently, fiercely, unapologetically. And every magazine, every award, every milestone was a reflection of that commitment. I continued walking, letting the morning light warm my shoulders. There was no rush, no pressure. Just me, the city, and the quiet thrill of knowing I had arrived exactly where I needed to be. I passed the stand and whispered under my breath, almost to myself, "This is what I built. This is my life. Not borrowed, not handed down, not controlled by anyone else. Mine. Fully, freely." Even as I kept walking, I felt the story continue inside me. The quiet momentum of someone who had reclaimed everything taken, who had learned that freedom wasn't loud or flashy. It was in waking up, moving forward, and owning every step of the journey with grace and courage. I looked at the skyline ahead, the sun glinting off glass buildings, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of anyone else's expectations pressing on my shoulders. I was unshakable, untethered, alive. The magazine cover was a milestone, yes, but it was also a reminder that life, my life, would keep unfolding exactly as I designed it. And as I traced an invisible line along the city horizon with my eyes, I whispered one last time, "This is just the beginning. Every day, every moment, mine, and no one can take that away." Ethan's mirror scene. That evening, I curled up on my couch with a cup of chamomile tea, soft light spilling across my apartment. The world outside continued to hum, but inside there was quiet, calm, a peace that I hadn't known for years. On the TV, a news channel played my interview. I spoke about Haven concepts, sustainable architecture, and the importance of building futures on one's own terms. Every word flowed naturally, confidently, unapologetically. Meanwhile, miles away, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, his drink untouched, glass sweating in his hand, eyes fixed on the screen. He watched my words, my laughter, my presence. The same phrase echoed, the one he had once said to try to belittle me, "You'll never make it without me." Only this time, the echo was cruelly ironic. He had spent years building a world where he was the center, the measure of my worth, and now, there I was, shining brightly, thriving, unstoppable, the life he had dreamed of for himself. He could only watch. I imagined the tension in his shoulders, the quiet storm behind his eyes, and couldn't help but feel a gentle satisfaction. Not revenge, not malice, just recognition that control is only temporary, and freedom, real freedom, is permanent. I poured myself another cup of tea and smiled softly. The TV showed my designs, my projects, my name in bold. Each frame was a reminder, I am mine. And the quietest victory of all is when someone who once tried to define you has no say in your life, only observation. As I sipped, I whispered into the empty room. He believed I'd always depend on him. Now, he watches me live the life he wanted. The words carried no bitterness, just finality, a peaceful closure, a mirror held up to a past I no longer inhabited. Letter closure. The next morning, I sat at my desk, envelope and pen before me. There was a check inside, the last of our shared debts, the final tangible connection between our lives.
I wrote a note on crisp stationery. Consider this my final favor. No explanation, no anger, no justification. Just quiet, decisive closure. The kind that comes from a person who has learned that freedom doesn't require confrontation, only action. I folded the note, sealed the envelope, and felt the weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't just a payment. It was a statement. The chapter was over, the debt of dependence, of obligation, of silent compromise, repaid and retired. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythm. People rushed past, lost in their own lives. I walked to the mailbox, each step deliberate. The envelope slipped into the slot with a soft thunk. And with it, a piece of my past, my doubts, my anger, my limitations, finally left my hands. As I turned to walk away, I didn't glance back. There was nothing to see, nothing to regret. I had done what needed to be done. Not to punish, not to prove, but to free myself. The final act of liberation doesn't require spectators, only resolve. I whispered quietly, "It is done, and I am free." The city carried on around me, and I carried the peace I had fought so long to reclaim. Weeks later, I stood in a bright, sunlit studio filled with young architects, eyes wide and eager. Their questions, their sketches, their dreams reminded me of the Maya I once was, unsure, unheard, underestimated. I spoke gently with conviction. Never build your life in someone else's blueprint. Sketch your own lines, draw your own dreams, and never let anyone tell you they are too big, too wild, or too impossible. The room absorbed every word. I saw hope spark in their eyes, a reflection of the fire that had once driven me. This was my legacy, not awards, not recognition,
Not revenge, but the ability to inspire others to claim their own lives unapologetically. I walked past models of buildings we had designed together, each one a testament to creativity, courage, and resilience. I felt the lightness of someone who had finally arrived fully in her own story, unburdened, unshakable, and free. The camera pans outward as I speak, sunlight streaming across my face, illuminating determination and serenity. The city skyline stretches beyond the windows, vast, vibrant, and mine to imagine, mine to build, mine to protect. And in that quiet, triumphant moment, I whispered softly to myself, I did it, on my own terms, fully, and no one, ever, can take this from me. The skyline glowed, my students listened, and I finally understood. Freedom is not loud. It doesn't demand applause. It simply exists, as calm, as light, as peace. And that is everything.